Raccoon searching high and low for the food to make him go. If I catch him in my trap, gonna make me a raccoon hat.
You know, for a season as dark, depressing, and serious as this one, it's good to know that they can still have a little bit of levity. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Mainframe, the Reboot Retrospective, Season 3. I live outside the net. Going through people, places, and shows. To this place, Mainframe, my favorite place to be. My format? I have no format. I am a user, creating things on the web. Reboot! When it was originally announced that Season 2 was going to be the end of Reboot, and ABC would no longer be requesting any more episodes, there was a lot of uncertainty going around in Mainframe Entertainment. While they were still allowed to finish the season, the prospect of trying to get their show into syndication seemed to be a bit of a daunting task. But then something amazing happened. Reboot became a hit. Not only was the show one of the highest rated cartoons at the time it was airing, but it also was gaining rewards left and right, including the Canadian-only Gemini Awards for Best Animated Series 3 years running. Because of this, a little toy company known as Hasbro took notice and, having just acquired many different toy franchises thanks to buying Kenner out, wanted Mainframe Entertainment to bring to life a series based on one of them. We all know that particular series today as... Though initially hated thanks to its complete removal from the original series of Transformers, as well as its use of animal forms instead of cars and planes, Beast Wars actually ended up being an even bigger hit than Reboot, thanks to the series' stellar storytelling, voice acting, and built-in toy line. With that success, Mainframe went back to their original story, dedicating themselves to Season 3 of Reboot. Even with this new clout and ability, though, the production and airing of the third season wasn't all sunshine and computer chips. Because Mainframe was making the show on their own money, it was actually rather difficult for the company to sell to different channels outside of Canada, where the show was based. Because of this, the Great White North was the only place you could really get the series for several years, with Americans only getting Season 3 and onwards once the show was picked up by Toonami close to the turn of the century. The United Kingdom, surprisingly enough, would actually be getting the new season a lot earlier than anywhere else, but their own broadcasting standards and practices got in the way, leaving at least half of the series unaired in some places and the entirety of it banned in others. There would be some who wouldn't see the series at all until it was released on DVD years later. Season 3 of Reboot is also a greatly different beast than the earlier seasons, with a change in focus in how the show was portrayed. Not only are the episodes split up into 4 separate arcs over the course of the entire season, but everything gets progressively darker the farther along you go, and it wasn't all that bright and sunny to begin with. The entire tone is set right from the beginning, as the first episode, To Mend and Defend, leads us right on the heels of the Season 2 finale, with our heroes hiding behind the shields of the principal office, while Megabyte and Hexadecimal loom before them with the hardware that destroyed the portal to the web. Most of Mainframe's army has fallen thanks to the web creatures and Megabyte's betrayal, with only 9 units left in the air, and the virus himself giving them all a command to surrender or be destroyed. Dot's not willing to take this lying down, though, and commands the remaining CPUs to fly in a single file formation. While appearing to be a bit of a suicide order, it's actually quickly revealed that Dot knows just how Megabyte's forces attacks, as they form a line on either side of the fleeing mainframers. This puts them in a perfect position for a retaliatory strike from the principal office, lowering the shields just so they can fire upon the viral forces and destroy them in return. Such an action leaves them defenseless, though, as one of the destroyed ABCs crashes into the shield generators, taking them offline. Seeing their shields go down, Megabyte orders Hexadecimal to halt her attack on our heroes, as without the shields, they're completely defenseless. The Queen of Chaos, on the other hand, doesn't really care. Even when her brother points out that destroying the principal office will destroy them as well, she simply responds with, "It will be glorious." Everyone is only saved in the end by Mouse redirecting some of the core's energy at the last moment to form a temporary shield. The hacker comments that the shields won't hold for long and that without a guardian, they gotta take the fight directly to the viruses. Our young boy Enzo states that he can actually take over Bob's role since he's actually been promoted to such a status. Dot shoots the idea down though, which, considering the fact that Enzo's just a little sprite, I don't really think anyone can fault her for that. With no other options, though, Dot and Mouse head out to fight, donning battle armor as they do. With Hexadecimal ready to fire the hardware again, Megabyte tries to stop her, not wanting the very thing he's been fighting for the last 2 seasons to be destroyed. The She-Virus bats him away like a fly, though, and proceeds to finish charging the weapon. It's only by the virtue of the user sending in a GameCube that saves everyone from being annihilated.
Whoa, now that's what I call a bug zapper.
Of course, once one thread is stopped, another has to pop up, as Enzo is racing to enter the GameCube, mostly thanks to his new Guardian protocol encouraging him. What's worse is that Andrea is following right behind him, and as a game sprite, win or lose, she'll leave with the game. With Mouse grabbing Andrea and stopping the game sprite, Enzo is instead joined by Frisket and Dot in the GameCube, our heroes finding themselves in a parody of the Evil Dead franchise, complete with its own Ash. Movie. While Megabyte takes a half-destroyed Hexadecimal to the Tor for repairs. During this, the virus notices a small interview being done by Mike the TV, and figures that he could use the doubt of the system against the new child guardian. I'd actually like to point out at this time that this is where we actually get to see the first bit of freedom Mainframe has from ABC. As when Dot reboots, she becomes a parody of Matisha Adams, complete with plunging neckline that shows a very hefty amount of cleavage. You see, throughout all of Season 1 and 2, Dot was actually not allowed to be designed with 2 breasts, as ABC considered that only characters who were either evil or morally questionable were allowed to actually have them, or any sex appeal, which pretty much explains Hexadecimal in a nutshell. If the description of this particular episode sounds a little odd or lacking, well, that's because it is. The start of Season 3 was written specifically to follow up from the story of the previous season. Because of this, it doesn't really stand on its own anywhere near as much as the Tearing or Infected did, but that's only to be expected, really. With his plan set in motion, Megabyte starts using propaganda throughout the system to turn the sprites of Mainframe against Enzo, actually using Cyrus from the Season 1 finale as his main method of operation. Between the Biome posting up anti-Enzo posters, and the virus preventing our heroes from entering any GameCubes, the citizens of Mainframe slowly start to believe that they have no real guardian among them. To combat this and to give Mainframers hope again, Fong suggests that Enzo enters a GameCube without the help of Dot, as winning a game without the big sprite means that the young Matrix boy is more than ready enough to be a hero. Mouse and Andrea offer to go into the game with him, but their icons aren't set up to reboot. Mouse tries to fix this by hacking into Enzo's icon and downloading the information into hers and Andrea's. It's untested though, so there's no guarantee that it will work. Using a decoy plan to trick Megabyte, Enzo and Andrea end up inside the next GameCube alone, as the young game sprite had tricked Mouse, preventing the hacker from entering the cube along with them.
Our icons are untested. There's no need for 2 of us to bear the risk.
But what about you?
I am a game sprite. If trapped, I can survive here.
I've gotta say, this is actually one of the major reasons I love Andrea. While she might not have the most character when it comes to personality, the depth of which she feels for everyone, most particularly our boy Hero, eclipses a lot what you would see with the others. Her potential sacrifices only hurt a little bit when you realize there's no chance in hell that the creators are going to get rid of her like that. While the children are dealing with the user, one crazy rodent by the name of Rocky the Rabid Raccoon, we cut back to see what Megabyte is up to, as he and one of his loyal minions finish up with their repairs on Hexadecimal. While this is more of an excuse for the creators to give the She-Virus a model upgrade, putting her into a form-fitting leather piece, Megabyte also plants a control collar on his sister, allowing him to effectively shock her into doing whatever he wants. The virus then goes on to say that with Hex completely under his power, he'll be able to burn Mainframe to the ground, Megaframe rising up from its ashes. It's episode 3 that we really start hitting our stride, as not only are we treated to an awesome James Bond-style opening,
When evil stands to conquer all, his only hope, a firework.
but we also get to see our heroes truly butt heads against Megabyte, something that hasn't really been done since Bob was shot off into the web. And we get to see just how different the interaction between the virus and Enzo is than it was with Bob, as it's clear that Megabyte has no respect for the young Matrix, considering him to be little more than a messenger boy and nothing else. That's entirely the reason for him even being there, as the virus gives Enzo a message for Dot, even stating flat out that,
"It is by my will alone you survive this encounter."
Enzo goes back to the principal office, his confidence all but destroyed, as Andrea tells of Megabyte's message, which pretty much amounts to how the gang has been hiding behind the shields, while everyone else in Mainframe is at the mercy of the virus, who would ensure that they would suffer. Dot tries to boost his confidence by calling him Guardian, but Enzo just bats that away, saying that he's little more than a delivery boy. That's when Mouse calls out, saying that she's glad that Bob wasn't here to see Enzo in such a state, giving up before he ever really fights. The comment alone is enough to give the young sprite some of his fire back, with both Mouse and Fong taking some of the words he says as his plan to trap Megabyte behind a firewall, effectively caging the virus. We soon find out that the reason Megabyte hasn't attacked in full yet is the fact that he's waiting for Hexadecimal to fully recover from her near destruction. Now that she's gotten all of her energy back, he prepares to assault the principal office directly, gathering all of his viral binomes for the attack. During this, Fong, Mouse, and Dot talk to one of the research binomes, who shows them some of the tech that they'll be using for the firewall, while Enzo and Andrea deal with another GameCube, though this one has an interesting problem in it. Namely a mob of angry binomes, all led by Cyrus. While at first it looks like they're ready to give our heroes a problem, they're easily dissuaded by Frisket and then the user. Pointing out to Cyrus that they'll all be killed if they don't stop said user, Viral and Guardian team up to try and save the day. The GameCube in and of itself is probably the source of most of the references that you'll see the creators put into a single episode, as not only do we get to see more of that James Bond influence we had with the episode's opening, but we also get to see nods to Jurassic Park, Indian in the Cupboard, and even Pixar's classic Jumping Lamp. The game itself is also point for point something out of the Wacky Races cartoon, complete with its own Penelope pit stop as the user. This episode also starts up one of my other favorite running gags in the entire series.
What is it with you and motorbikes?
Once the GameCube leaves, we get another confrontation between Enzo and Megabyte, the young sprite seeing just what kind of lows the virus is willing to sink after seeing what he's done to Hexadecimal. Before he can do anything, though, Mouse plants the last of the devices for the firewall, our young Guardian activating it and sealing all the virals inside the sector, hack and slash grabbing Cyrus at the very last moment. It's at this point our heroes seem to finally have some form of advantage, as they are able to keep Megabyte and his cronies under lock and key. Even when the virus tries to escape the firewall in the next episode using Hexadecimal's powers, he finds himself face to face with the cannons of Mainframe, losing not only a heavy chunk of his army, but also one of his generals to boot. While the rest of the Mainframers celebrate beating back the virals, Dot hides away in one of the more private rooms, breaking down into tears. Fong finds her and discovers that the young woman feels empty inside, like some part of her has died, and she asks the Keeper of the Core just how many more have to suffer before Megabyte is dealt with once and for all. Fong tells her that she must be strong, for the sake of Mainframe and Bob, whom he believes will be able to survive the web. Back in the tour, Megabyte demands from his lead scientist just how long they'll be able to keep control over his sister, to which the Binome replies that they don't even know how they've been able to do so for as long as they have already, suggesting that the She virus might even like being tied up.
Let us not even think about that.
We also learn that Megabyte is starting to get fed up with Hack and Slash, who are off to destroy Cyrus for his betrayal from the previous episode. While initially ready to kill the traitor off, Slash saves Cyrus at the last second, saying to Hack that he missed Bob and it was only because of the Guardian that the two were ever prevented from doing anything really bad. Now that he's gone, there's nothing to stop them. While still dedicated to Megabyte, it's at this point that we can see that loyalty is actually being tested when they're faced with the ever-growing seriousness of what lies before them. After a tender bonding moment between Dot and Enzo, our heroes get ready for another GameCube that starts to fall, while Megabyte looks on from his cage, saying that Enzo should have fun while he can. We also see Cyrus trying to escape the firewall, meeting up with Hexadecimal's pet Scuzzy, who I honestly don't think I've ever mentioned before this point. Whoops. Regardless, the two come to some sort of deal, which somehow ends up with the little creature getting past the firewall and Cyrus escaping. It's actually never explained how it happened, and despite it being a tiny plot hole, it actually still bugs me to this day. Inside the GameCube, this time being a Mortal Kombat parody, we find out that this particular game is dangerous in the same respect as the Funhouse. Because it's a fighting game where the players are randomly selected, Enzo and Andrea could reboot into a character and then never get chosen to fight. What the young Matrix boy suggests is for the game sprite to select a character so they're prepared, while he tries to game the system, rebooting into a character that the game decides will fight next. After missing the first hero chosen, Enzo spends the rest of the game watching as the user, who has selected a demonic character by the name of Zayton, to follow and learn his moves. It's in the final level that Enzo's plan finally comes into fruition, as he reboots into a scorpion-like character. The pair fight, but it's clear that even with Enzo getting enough hits in to win a round, the user is just too good. When the young Guardian finally slips and misses an attack, the user strikes, slicing at Enzo's eye. Knocked down, all the young Matrix has the time to do is to change his icon as the user goes to finish him off, Andrea and Frisket also doing the same. Back in the principal office, Dot and the others wait anxiously, their systems picking up on an energy build-up of the game leaving. She orders the medical teams to get ready for a pickup, before hearing the announcement of the game's departure.
Game over.
Here it goes. Get ready.
The user wins.
Enzo. No. No!
This is, in my opinion, one of the strongest moments in all of Reboot. As far as anyone knows, both the viewers and our heroes in Mainframe, Enzo, Frisket, and Andrea are all dead, erased by the game, never to be seen again. And for Dot, who was already broken after losing Bob, to see her reaction and losing her little brother as well is more than a little heart-wrenching, especially with Megabyte laughing in the background. As a kid, I honestly did not know what was going to happen next, especially since GameCubes weren't well defined enough for us to understand what was going to happen next. We learn just what the show has in store for us as we go into the episode Icons, as we're in yet another game, this time it being a parody of Mars Attacks. We see sprites inside fighting a spaceship and apparently are well used to fighting users. It's only as they talk to each other that we learned one of them is Andrea. When they finish the GameCube leaves, revealing a nearly destroyed system and a fully grown Andrea and Enzo, the latter whom now goes by his last name of Matrix. Needless to say, the change in age also leaves a change in voice actors, with Christopher Gray, who had voiced young Enzo for Season 3, to Paul Dobson, who anime fans might be more familiar with as Noraku from Inuyasha. Andrea was taken over by Sharon Alexander from the original actress Andrea Libman. Okay, it's cool that Andrea was played by Andrea, but why does that name sound so familiar to me? Okay, how in the hell did I miss the fact that Andrea's original voice actress would eventually become two of the most popular ponies ever? Note to self, when it comes to reviewing animated series, talk about the voice actors as the characters are introduced. Anyway, we see that the time in the games have changed them, as Matrix not only goes immediately for his gun when surprised, but also strikes out on his own when Andrea goes to find the command.com of the system. While patching up the system, we see our grown Enzo fight off a large bug-like creature attacking a small sprite. It's then revealed that Matrix doesn't consider himself a guardian, but a renegade, no longer adhering completely to the code of to mend and defend. During this, Andrea finds the commander of the system, who calls himself Wise One, and they talk for a bit. It's here that it's revealed to the audience that to survive the games and not be nullified like everyone else, she, Enzo, and Frisket all switch their icons to Game Sprite mode, allowing them to leave with the game. They've been trying to get back to Mainframe ever since. While I do question about the fact that this change in mode was something that has never occurred in the series before this point, it is something that I do consider to be a reasonable addition. One of the major reasons I complain about all the things that we have learned in GameCubes previously is because it seemed to be following the same rules of Star Trek's holodeck, where a slight change in how settings worked could screw up the entire thing. But traveling within the cubes? Andrea flat out states that they've been spending who knows how long trying to find a way back home. So it's either death, or spending the rest of your lives searching for a way back. The rest of the episode is mostly about us getting reintroduced to Enzo and Andrea, and seeing how they have both changed as they do their best to help out the citizens of this broken system. While I'll go more into depth of their characters once we hit that part of the retrospective, it's clear to anyone that Matrix has grown a lot darker than he used to be, no longer being that bright, optimistic kid he once was. The next episode, where no sprite has gone before, really isn't all that important storyline-wise, but if you're a lover of Star Trek, you have to watch it. Trust me, it's that fun, and I do not want to spoil it whatsoever. It's when we get to number 7 that things really take an interesting turn, as it seems Matrix has finally gotten to the point of giving up on ever finding their way home, despite Andrea trying her best to keep his spirits up. As they enter in another game, our heroes are shocked and surprised to see Mainframe, whole and undamaged within it. Though initially excited, Matrix knows that it's impossible for the entire system to be put into Game Sprite mode. This is further confirmed when they find Hack and Slash being chased by Bob, who has a functioning key tool, as Glitch has been barely working ever since it was crushed by Megabyte. Pointing out that they're still in a game, Andrea suggests rebooting to find out just what the hell is going on. Initially, Matrix is reluctant, as he doesn't want to turn into his younger self, saying that he's left that little boy behind him. But the only way to find out is to do it, and as our heroes reboot, they become Hexadecimal, Megabyte, and Scuzzy. Now stuck as virals, our heroes regroup to the tour, using Frisket as a way to spy on Bob, Dot, and Fong. They learn about someone called Number 1, whom Andrea thinks might be the objective of the game. Matrix is distracted though, both by how Megabyte's body works, as well as by the fact that both he and Andrea are able to channel the original viruses, the pair even adopting their voices and mannerisms. The Game Sprite in particular seems to be taking her role rather strongly, pointing out that Megabyte's voice is so strong and commanding, definitely not a little boy's.
No, it's something worse. It represents everything I hate.
Is that everything you hate? Or everything you're afraid of becoming?
After that, Matrix decides to confront Bob and the others directly, flying alone to the principal office and demanding that they need to talk. While uncertain at first, Bob and Dot refuse to believe that the Megabyte they see before them is really Enzo, especially when he mentions about needing to see Number 1. After using Glitch to push the renegade back, Fong summons a giant crane that will file and index him, whatever that means. Our hero-turned-virus fights back though, infecting the crane and making his escape back to the Tor.
Happy? Sad. Happy. Sad. Happy. Sad.
Intrigued. I've never been so in touch with my emotions.
There's no reason I highlighted this moment, it's just one of my favorites from this particular episode. Moving on. Eventually, Fong decides that Bob and Dot should meet up with Number 1, Matrix hiding out in an abandoned building until the two crosses his path, following behind them. It turns out that whoever Number 1 is, he's been hiding out in Dot's diner the entire time. Going into the diner, though... Yeah, and it gets weirder as the masked binomes all call in for the judge, who turns out to be Bob. They proceed to have a rather one-sided trial, with the charges lobbied against Matrix is believing that the ends justify the means and becoming everything he hates. Try as he might, the renegade is unable to get a real word in edgewise, and eventually gives into his anger, destroying nearly everything before him. Hexadecimal appears, claiming to have figured out everything a long time ago, and Matrix demands to know, once more, who is Number 1. A vid window appears, showing him a reflection of Megabyte, who then speaks to him, claiming to be Number 1, saying that he is the force in the renegade's life that consumes him. After destroying the window and returning to normal, Matrix's own reflection claims the same, stating that he loves no one but himself, and after shooting that image away, one last figure appears before him.
I am Number 1, the original.
But how? You're me!
But you hate me! You must! Look at what you've become! You've forgotten your family! You let yourself become a prisoner of the games! What would Bob think of you now?
And after all this, Matrix wakes up, having been knocked out cold by a golf ball thanks to the golf game that they're in, and the vast majority of kids watching the show at the time are wondering what kind of acid trip they just got off. The twofold answer to that is that not only is this a pivotal moment for Matrix, as he comes to the realization that he's become just like the viruses that have destroyed his life, but this episode in and of itself is probably one of the biggest references Mainframe ever did, as nearly everything in it is taken from the 1960s show The Prisoner, a spy show in which the main character is kidnapped, taken to an island filled with people he cannot trust, and has to use all of his skills to find out who is, you guessed it, Number 1. It's actually surprising how much of The Prisoner they actually stuck into this particular episode.
I will not be pushed, filed, stamped, indexed, briefed, debriefed, or numbered. My life is my own.
I will not be pushed, filed, stamped, briefed, debriefed, or numbered. My life is my own.
In all seriousness though, this episode is probably one of the most impactful of the third season, if not the entire series, but we'll get a bit more into that once we actually get to the character analysis. It's in the episode with no name, which is legitimately the title of the episode, that things really get interesting as Matrix and Andrea land into a system that has transportation to the web, which not only would let them get back home, but would also let them find Bob to boot. Any celebration is interrupted as a binome steals Glitch from Matrix, causing the renegade to follow after the thief and leaving Andrea and Frisket to themselves. Andrea ends up getting to the docks looking for transport and runs into Maxine, a search engine. Maxine here is actually a bit of an interesting character because she was actually created for the IMAX reboot ride, something that was only available in Las Vegas, Vancouver, and Toronto theaters. The short in and of itself isn't too much on its own, but it's interesting that the creators thought that she deserved a role in the actual show. She reveals though that things have changed since our heroes have last been in contact with net travel, as not only has all travel without proper identification been banned, but it turns out the Guardians are the ones who have banned it. They also have a new motto: it's no longer to mend and defend, but to divide and render. Back with Matrix, he finds the thief easily, even activating a tracker signal on Glitch to prove the Binome held the key tool. While not looking for a fight originally, Matrix puts his gun into Death Blossom mode when it's clear the thief isn't willing to return Glitch without trouble. With the entire bar threatened with deletion, the Binome surrenders Glitch and Amscrays along with the rest of the bar, barring one person.
You got a deletion wish?
I'm looking for Guardian 452.
Imagine that, so am I. Who are you?
I'm Turbo, Prime Guardian.
After stopping Matrix from blowing his head off, Turbo talks with the Renegade, dropping the bombshell on our hero and the audience by pointing out that game time is accelerated. That means that Matrix and Andrea grew much older much faster compared to everyone else, and that by all means Enzo shouldn't have been all that much older than when he was when he lost the game. There's still time to go back to save both Mainframe and Bob. After fending off some Guardians who have been searching for Bob, Turbo reveals that all of the Guardians, including himself, have been infected by a super virus named Damon, which in and of itself is a frightening concept considering a normal virus and bugs like the Medusa couldn't affect Guardians before this. The only ones who are left unaffected are Bob and Matrix himself. Unable to get their hands on Matrix, whom they believe is Bob because of how their tracking systems work, the corrupted Guardians instead try to use Andrea and Frisket as leverage, only for the latter of the two to make quick work of the two lackeys. Shortly thereafter, the game sprite meets the leader of the infected Guardians, and the two have a good old-fashioned Western showdown. Matrix bids Turbo goodbye, the two having worked out a small bond, with Turbo saying they now have a friend on the inside of Damon's infection, as long as he can fight it off. After leaving through a tear, Andrea reunites with Matrix, the two discussing how they'll need to find a ship that will be able to take them back to Mainframe. That's when a rather unexpected ally appears.
Capacitor?